We're live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sight and Sound Breakdown. That's the name we chose, right? That's what we.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, sure.
Sight and Sound Breakdown, episode number 0. Today we're talking about honorable mentions. We'll talk in a minute about what exactly that means. But first, I will introduce my panel. I will introduce first, right below me, one of my best friends in the community, my trivia partner, and the person I ripped this idea off of, Andrew James Barr. How are you doing today? Are you excited about the show? In general, starting with a long journey starting today. How are you feeling on our first step?
Yeah, I know. We've talked about this for a while now. So to see it actually come to fruition is really cool. And there's a lot of movies that are going to be coming up on this list that I've never even heard of before. So to see what people like Martin Scorsese and Spielberg and all of them have picked as like the greatest movies of all time, I feel like we're going to learn a lot.
Yeah, that's what this show's all about. And just a little behind the curtain, the way this show did happen is a couple years ago, Andrew was doing a show called
500 Stones.
It was a countdown of the Rolling Stone Top 500, and I thought, this is awesome. How can I rip this off and make it about movies? And then the Sight and Sound list came out, and I did nothing for a couple years, and then Cody came to me and said, "Hey, do you have an idea for a show?" I'm like, "Yeah, can I do a show about a 2-year-old magazine article that no one's really talking about anymore?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "It'll take about 2 or 3 years." He's like, "Let's do it." So that all starts tonight. My other co-host, somebody we all know in the community who loves movies, loves talking about movies, so I really want him to be a part of this. Payson Johnson. We're finally here. How you feeling about it?
Yeah, I'm feeling great. Honestly, Kirk, genuinely, I was really honored when you did invite me on. I remember when the 2022 Sight and Sound list came out, and that is something I had been I was eagerly anticipating, because that list is updated every 10 years. Unfortunately, the AFI list doesn't do that. America, what are we doing? England has us beat there. Whatever.
AFI's done nothing for years.
And I still remember the day when that list came out, and there was a lot of contention in certain chats, and I was just kind of like, look, this just gives me an excuse to watch all these movies that I haven't heard of and see if I agree with them. Like you, I've just been kind of a little lazy with it now, but now that you've given me an excuse to watch it, I'm super excited. Kirk, something I do think is important. Are we doing the critics list for the Sight and Sound list or the directors list?
That's a great question. We are doing the critics list. We'll talk about that in a minute. Thank you for asking to have me clarify. Also joining us today, our first guest. He's not going to be a regular member of the panel, unless no one else is ever willing to do this, then he's going to be stuck coming every episode. Jacoby Baycroft, thank you for joining us. How you feel about being at our inaugural episode?
I'm very honored to be here on episode 0, the starter one. Before you get really into the good stuff, I'm glad to have the scraps around it. No, it's great. But I'm very excited to be here. I'm very honored. I love talking with you guys. So I'm excited for the discussions because, so I like hearing other opinions about these really really rich movies that I would love to hear you guys' opinions on. So, because I always like learning and always like growing and approaching it from a different perspective. And knowing this panel, I'm sure there's a lot of varying different opinions and different ways to view it. So I'm very happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And this will be the setup moving forward. Andrew and Payson will be my regular co-hosts. We'll have a rotating guest every episode. Cody and I learned the hard way that it's really hard to get people to sign up for and fill a panel when they don't get to pick their own movies. So I think we could probably handle getting one person a month. So this is going to be the format, and we'll do this moving forward. As Jacoby mentioned, this is episode 0. And the reason we're doing episode 0 is because we are going to cover the top 100 of the Sight and Sound list. They eventually published, I think, up through 250 or something like that. We're doing top 100. The reason being, I want to have a realistic end date in mind for this. I'm not a young man. I want to live to see this whole thing play out. So
in other words, time.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what I wanted to do today is we have that end of the list, that 101 up to 2, whatever it is. I think it was there's a big tie for 243. Is where it ends. But
just to throw a wrench into things, right? Just to make it more interesting.
So we So what we did is we each picked one movie from that section list, calling that honorable mention, just to kind of give some credit to those movies. A lot of those movies were on the list; they're no longer on it. So we want to talk about just a spattering of movies that almost made it and didn't. Before we start, though, we'll talk about the list in general. If you're not familiar with Sight and Sound, the Sight and Sound list every 10 years, as Payson mentioned, the British Film Institute polls a bunch of critics, and I think this year it was like 1,300 or 1,600. It was a large.
It was 1,600.
Yeah, it was their biggest group ever of contributors.
No wonder it takes 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. They also do as we talked about a minute ago, they do a director's list. For some reason, that's kind of like the bastard stepchild. No one really talks about that one. Personally, I think it's a better list. I think the directors have, in my opinion, a better idea, or not a better idea, but just better motivation. I think they're just looking at, hey, what is the best movies? They get excited about movies where critics may have.
Yeah, I want to know Uwe Boll's top 10 list.
Well, I mean, I think they do like. I don't know if you guys remember when it came up, but they were releasing like individual lists. Ty West came out, and he just had like 10 bangers on his list.
Yeah.
They were all great movies, and people tore him apart for it because I guess, I think they were too film bro-y for some people's tastes, and I think that's what a lot of the critics are trying to avoid. And then, I mean, there's still great movies on the list, so but yeah. That's why we're doing today is that top of the list. And just before we get started, like I said, Jacoby's our guest. If you want to be on the show, we have our first couple episodes all lined up, but there's going to be a lot of them. So if you are interested in being a part of this, just send me a message, let me know. And don't feel like you have to be like an expert in these kind of movies, because none of us are. So if you're thinking like, oh, I'm not a art house person or a foreign language person, I'm excited to get your take. All you have to do is be willing to sit down and watch the movies for the episode with an open mind and give your opinion, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. So let me know if you want to be on.
And you have to fight the previous guest first. So the next person had to fight me in order to do it, and they won, so then they took over. So it's just a revolving cycle.
Yes.
So be ready to throw
The challenger does get to choose the weapon, however.
Yeah, they chose something that I was not adept with, so that's why.
Those fights will be available at the $50 tier level of the Patreon. So be looking out for that. But yeah, let's get started. We are going to go, like I said, we all picked a movie from the top. It will be like this. Usually we're just going to go over the list. Mostly it'll be 5. We're going to try to shoot for 5 movies per episode, but some of these movies are really long. So we will
Can't wait for Showa.
I know. We're going to have to. We will have to break it down. There may be a few single movie episodes because of the length.
Yeah, there's going to have to be.
But that'll be fun too. But we are going to get started. And the first pick was Jacoby's. We're just going to go down as they appear on the list. In a 22-way tie for number 243 on the list was Possession, which was Jacoby's pick. Jacoby, why don't you tell us why you picked this movie and tell us just a little bit about it to get started.
I didn't even realize. I didn't even realize while looking at the list that this was one of the 20 million way tie of the 243.
Yeah, and that's something that's also annoying about this. Like, just have them rank the lists. Yeah. Like, there's so many like stupid ties. You're asking for 10 movies. Just
whoever the last person to submit for that was, just like they're like the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you do it that way too. Just don't have 22-way ties. It's silly. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes. So Possession. I chose this movie honestly because it's a movie that's been on my watch list for a very long time. It's one I have like a list on my phone. Obviously, that I'm sure maybe we all have like watch lists. Before I had Letterboxd, I had like the list on my phone, and that's been on my list for a while. And I just never got around to it. I don't really know why, because it's always seemed super intriguing. I've heard about its reputation. I've heard about its just sort of visual style, and thought that'd be something that would be really interesting. And I thought now's the time to do it when I'm literally forced to watch it because of a show. And that is why I picked it. So that's why. I mean, I wish there was a grander reason, but just like I needed to watch it on my list, but I am glad I did.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know about everybody else. I really like this movie. I found myself like, it took me a while to finish it because I was it was so hard to watch that anytime I had an excuse like, I got to stop this for a minute, walk away, I did. So it took me a while to finish it. The first thing that struck me was just how, like, the nightmare logic of it. You never, the way it's edited is you never get an established shot of where someone is or why, so you don't know how much time passed. This movie could take place over days. It could take place over weeks, could take place over months, and there's no way to tell. And it's just very disorienting the way it's shot, and just very off-putting in a really, for me anyway, very good way. What did you guys think about the general tone of this movie?
Yeah, I had no idea that this was the tone going into it, to be honest. I really didn't know what to expect. And I think it takes a few minutes to be like, okay, to get on its wavelength into like what it's doing. And then once you're in it, you don't mind that it's about 2 hours of just like screaming at volumes like unheard of for like Human Dimension for like multiple stretches of time. But I think once you're in it, I think it really just is captivating and spooky. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, the number one thing I think, like, I absolutely love this movie, but I could totally see someone walking away, especially from the acting perspective, and saying these aren't good performances, because it is very over the top with all the acting. It is very like loud. It is very in your face, and it's almost melodramatic. But when you see how the movie is filmed, how it all just feels so cramped, you really get the vibe of how uncomfortable all these characters are, how just awful this situation is. Like we open up on this woman who is leaving her husband just out of the blue and is just saying, and her husband's like, did you cheat on me? And she's like, sure, let's go with that. And just you and her husband, like the scene where he's like, no, you're not allowed to leave me. You can't do this. And he's just like throwing things in this restaurant and just absolutely just going crazy. Like, on the one hand, I'm like, would a normal person react like this? And then I'm like, honestly, if you learned your loved one was like leaving you just randomly like this, I think you would understand if someone has a slightly irrational like reaction. But just like, yeah, I really love how Andrei Zulawski is the director, how he really directs all these actors. Sam Neill and Isabelle Adjani give really great performances here. And yeah, I really just love the whole feeling of how just like how uncomfortable I feel watching this movie.
I did not care for this movie.
Not a bar movie?
I did not care for this movie.
Fair.
For the first hour, I hated everybody. Just everybody seemed like the worst kind of person. And like things got a little bit more interesting in the second half. I will give it that. But like the performances I thought ranged from really great performances, like really great scenes, like the scene in the tunnel. It starts off really great, and then suddenly it becomes all hands. It's hands. Everybody's just doing
possession, Bar. No, that's what happens.
I will say the cinematography for this film is fantastic. It's like what Kirk says. Like the fact that there's like no establishing shots really does set a tone. And that final shot in particular, that final scene in particular, just like the depth perception of like Sam Neill's character, like in the back behind like frosted glass, and it's just really great to look at. But I hated the story. The story, it's not that it didn't make sense. I can get behind a movie that makes no sense and kind of just goes with it. But it's like, it's almost an hour and a half of just, why are you leaving me? I won't tell you. Why you gotta tell me? But I won't tell you. We're screaming. I was like, I cannot get into this.
I think something pretty important is revealed in like an hour into this movie, but I do understand that.
I would say, but I see where you're coming from. I didn't think it was a perfect movie. Some of the problems I had, it's funny because I had some opposite issues with you, because to me, I enjoyed the beginning more. I'd say like maybe the first third or first half before we really figure out what's going on, because I kind of like that disorienting feeling, like what is happening here. And even though you really never get a full understanding of what's going on, you kind of, things start to be unraveled and revealed. And I kind of like the before part of that. Also, If I had a problem with a performance for me, it was with Sam Neill. Just
Yeah.
because I thought he was, I think, and I'm blanking on the actress's name who played Anna.
Isabel Anjani.
Yeah, even though she becomes completely unhinged, thank you, Payson. Even though she becomes completely unhinged, I think she takes a minute to get there, where Sam Neill starts here.
Starts at 11.
And everything he says, even at the moments where you're like, well, this is just kind of a normal thing happening. He's and bringing everything up and bringing everything to that performance. So, although I do agree with Payson, there are moments where like, okay, yeah, I get why he would be behaving this way, maybe in this moment, that's a little over the top. I think he just starts at such a high level that's hard for that.
It's just such an odd choice. Right? That's an odd choice especially for where that character goes. Because if his arc is sort of like getting more to the possessed side than others, you'd think he would start at least a base level of like 3 or 4 before ramping up to like an 8 or 9, instead of starting at an 8 or 9 and then ending at like a 19 or 20.
Yeah.
I also get like, it's weird, just like from the haircut to the voice and everything. I'm just like, why am I getting like Clockwork Orange era Malcolm McDowell like from the aesthetic?
You're not the only one who said that. I heard other people say that too. And it was so odd. I don't know if it was just the way it was shot, but there were certain times where I was like, oh, that's definitely Sam Neill. And like there's certain times like that looks like a completely different person. Like I know he's like really young in this, but it did not look at certain times anything like the Sam Neill we know.
And it also doesn't help that like the person that that Mark's wife is having an affair with looks so much like Mark.
Yeah.
Mark is Sam Neill's character.
Yeah.
Like at the beginning, I'm like, wait, I need to put 2 and 2 together. That like, okay, no, these are 2 different people, which only makes the ending a little bit more complicated when you have now literally 2 clones. Like, yeah. I'm not sure how spoiler heavy we're gonna get with the talk of this movie. All I will say is look at the genre of this film, and you might be able to guess certain things that are gonna happen.
And what we'll do, I meant to bring this at the beginning of the show, we are going to have, because these, in general, we're going to be talking about mostly about movies a lot of people haven't seen, we will do like a spoiler section. So keep this part of the conversation kind of spoiler free. And at the end, we'll you know, anything real spoiler we want to discuss that, we'll timestamp it. So,
Gotcha.
But yeah, I feel the same way, because even there is a scene, you know, like they look so much alike, and then there's a scene where another character is played by the same actress who plays his wife, and there's no explanation given until maybe the last 2 or 3 minutes of the movie. So you're like, does that mean anything? Is it's supposed to be her? So it just adds that whole disorienting effect this entire movie has.
And I totally understand how it can bother some people. Like I went into this. This is the second time I've seen this movie. I watched it last year during October just because I heard it was just a really great horror movie. And I watched it. I didn't know anything except for like, I had seen one shot of Isabel Adjani before. It's that like iconic reaction shot of her getting slapped and her just giving that like really creepy smile, which is excellent. But like, I didn't really like know where this plot was going. And like when the shoe finally drops, I was like, whoa. But yeah, like when Kirk is talking, like when I first saw Bob's teacher, who is Mark's son, when you see his teacher and you see like she's played by the same person that plays that plays his wife, and you see just how creepy her eyes was, I was just like, what is going on? And I just kind of love that like really creepy vibe.
That's because to me it's a very disorienting movie, and I was wondering if you guys, if like the disorientation of it affected the creepiness of it, like of anything. Were you guys creeped out by this movie at all? Like, was there any really scary moments, or was everything happening so much all at once that it's like, oh god, like I can't even get my bearings.
The one moment that sticks out to me is when the private investigator enters the apartment, and then you're seeing what he's seeing, and then you see the big thing, the big reveal, and it's such a distance and it's in such darkness that it takes time for your eyes to adjust to it. And that part I really like, because I thought that was like really, really well done.
And just another aspect of this movie that I think really helps it is like, I just feel cold while watching this movie. Like this movie is filmed with like this really like unique blue filter to it, where
like every aquamarine almost.
Yeah, it just seems like really murky. It's set in Germany, and just like I like that, just like climate change of when I'm watching this movie just feels really, really, really cool.
That's just what Berlin looks like, though. I mean, that's just
Yeah,
Well, no,
yeah.
And they all speak with British accents in German.
I do think that they definitely use that like Cold War era Germany aesthetic to the advantage, and it does make it, to answer your question, Jacoby, I think a lot creepier. Like those opening shots, you get those wide shots with those big buildings, like those like just very German looking, like just gray and white, chalk buildings, that kind of just, I don't know, made me feel like claustrophobic and agoraphobic all at the same time. But just yes, Jacoby, I was very creeped out by this. I think there's so many little things they put in this movie that like don't really need to be there, but that are just so off-putting.
I definitely wrote down one.
If
The rocking chair.
Yeah,
No,
the scene that you mentioned where the private investigator goes to to her apartment. First of all, worst private investigator ever.
Oh, he's
awful.
He's like
so
chasing
obvious.
her like
Away,
3
bro.
feet
Like, what are you
away,
doing?
and then she turned around like. But if
And he literally starts running after
Yeah.
her.
So yeah, there's this scene where he's running and he like gets frustrated and he like kicks something. Did you guys notice what he kicks? It's just laying in the road.
No.
It was a mannequin's head, and it just laying there in the middle of the street for no reason. And he kicks it and it goes flying towards the camera. And I was like, and I had to pause it, like play it in slow motion to see. I'm like, yeah, that's a mannequin's head. But just there's a lot of little things in this movie like that. They're just like, there's no reason that is in there, and like most people aren't even going to notice it. But it just adds that, like, it's like in the back of your mind, like subconsciously, this is just so
what
weird.
is going on?
Yeah, what was the one you noticed, Jacoby?
Well, for
I'm
I know
sorry.
the creepiness aspect, I guess, for me, the one moment where it really clicked, like, it's not even any of like the big reveal stuff, but like the moment when he's like kind of watching home videos and it's her like ballet teaching,
Yeah,
and all of a sudden she like she basically the camera doesn't make it's not really a home video, but it's
No,
kind of
it makes zero sense.
No, but like when she starts talking like to the camera itself, and all of a sudden I felt cold, but in that scary way. I'm like, Jesus, like this is actually really creepy now, because like for the first half of the movie you're kind of good on the outside of this, and now she's like looking straight at you, and she's and that was really affecting to me. Like I was like, that was the creepiest part of the movie in my opinion.
And after that, there's a couple points outside of that video where she kind of stops and looks at the camera, and like she's supposed to be looking at something else, but she's looking right at you, and just those eyes are crazy. Payson, you said you noticed something that was specifically that creeped you out.
Yeah, well, just the one scene I think that goes like a little too far for me, where I was like, yeah, I don't really think I needed that, was when she's looking at the statue of Jesus and she starts pleasuring herself. I'm like, okay, this is the point where I think we're going a little too, like, I get it now.
Yeah, that was a little too on the nose, I think, but
You know what I started thinking of the moment that you guys were talking about her just like looking straight into the camera?
Like, you know what I was thinking when she started pleasuring herself in front of you?
But I started thinking to myself, you know who probably loves this movie, and I mean loves this movie to the point where he steals like little things from it? M. Night Shyamalan. I feel like Shyamalan loves this film. Because considering like how many times like he has like his actors like staring straight into the camera, like delivering like dialogue and shit like that, and just like the tone and aesthetic, I think that,
especially with where the movie goes in the second half, I can totally see Shyamalan getting a lot of inspiration from this movie. I will say, 2 movies this week have A+ fourth wall breaks, and
well, okay. Was there anything else before we get into spoilers? Was there anything else anybody in general? The one thing I like to talk, I think is interesting is, you pick up early that the title "Possession" kind of has like a double meaning. It's about this is about a divorce. This whole story is I think someone brought up this guy comes home from a long business trip, and that's another weird thing too. Like you're just dropped in, you have no idea what his job is. It's something important and strange, but you don't.
No, I looked it up because I was a little confused. He's a spy for West Germany, and he's getting back from a mission, and I'm like, this is a little casual.
I had no idea that's what it was. It like makes sense afterwards. Like once you see it, I'm like, oh, I didn't get that at all. I thought it was like a salesman or something. Like,
and they throw you, and I love that because my exposition is one of my biggest pet peeves. So I love when a movie just kind of just throws you in the deep end and lets you figure it out. And I think that also adds the creepiness where you just really can't get your bearing story wise. Like, why is all this going on?
Especially horror movies. I like when horror movies just kind of can start and kind of forego with the exposition. I think they're really affecting that capacity.
Yeah. But it's this couple is breaking up after he gets back, and it's about him really like the title possession. There's obviously like supernatural elements to it, but the idea of just like his possessiveness of her, and his need to have her, and how that drives the story. And I did read that the director was going through a divorce.
That's hilarious.
And that makes it so
that
much creepier, and that's
so much.
But kind of makes it more terrifying. That's what this was going through. And I understand, because I mean, I've had in my family like people separate and get divorced, and they get ugly, and it doesn't obviously get this bad, but it gets pretty rough, and you can see how someone's mind would go to this.
What do you think the ex-wife thinks after she saw this movie? Do you think she's seen it and be like let's see how we're feeling here?
I'm so proud of him.
Wow.
Okay. Good.
Wow, he's really healing. Good for him.
Yeah, he's taking this really well. I don't have any other pre-spoiler stuff besides the thing that Bob is a dumb name for a child.
Yes.
Like it's really funny. It's almost like when you meet like a child like Paul or like a child Doug. It's like there are certain things where it's like when you're born with this, you gotta come out of the womb like 30. Like, I'm sorry. Bob is really funny.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and, like I said, we will put a timestamp in the description here. So if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want to have anything given away, skip to wherever it tells you to skip to. And but with that in mind, things take a really wild turn in this movie. I said in my review, it's Kramer versus Kramer meets The Thing. Things get really creepy really fast. What are your thoughts on the turn it takes and where it eventually ends up?
I'll just say, I wish in the credits that they didn't say at the beginning, like, effects done by this, because now I'm like, okay, well, now we're gonna see something here, It was like a very big title card of like the creature effects done by this. I kind of wish that wasn't it, so that when we see that the whatever manifestation of Sam Neill, whatever that thing was, like the doppelganger, what it was growing into. I wish I had no bearing going into it, so I could have been a little bit surprised.
Yeah, when we've been watching this movie, of what at this point is like this really like traumatic / melodramatic look at this couple's ugly divorce. Things are a little otherworldly, but this is just like a really like fairly grounded story. And then when you're following that private investigator, when he goes up those stairs and he sees that like decomposed body just like slowly starting to like transform, and you finally realize what this movie is going to be. Like I didn't know what type of horror movie this was when I first saw it, and I was just like, whoa, like I was shell shocked when I first saw this movie. It reminds me of the experience watching like the only other film I don't want to get too much into this if you haven't seen it. It reminds me of watching Audition. Have any of you guys seen Audition? The Japanese
I refuse to, because I know the one scene.
Yeah. There's one moment in that, like, it is just a complete 180 in tone, and I was just like, okay, I am in for this movie for everything it's giving me.
Yeah, I thought with the creature, what really struck me was how, and again, I referenced The Thing because it's, I don't mean this in a bad way, it's like very uncinematic.
Yeah.
Where it's not something like you're like, oh, here's the creature and here's what it is, and you can tell by looking at it what it does and what the point to it is. It's just kind of like this disgusting organic mess. And you really like
breathing, and it's just like
breathing, and you can't tell like where the head ends and where the limb begins. It's just like this like blob of flesh. And it obviously eventually kind of like mutates and grows and becomes something else. But just that those first initial views of seeing that thing and just trying to, and again, going back to what Jacoby said about the general creepiness, obviously, just seeing something so like just unearthly was kind of hard to watch.
It's so funny to know that the guy who designed the creature for this film would go on to create E.T. because they're two wildly different looking things. But I love the way that the creature kind of like builds and grows as you see it. You never see it actually like physically shifting.
Yeah.
And I actually really loved that aspect of it because every single time you're kind of anticipating like what's it going to look like this time.
Yeah.
So I think that was a really smart move to do it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Hellraiser. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's kind of the same thing where you start out with just like a decomposing, just barely humanoid amount of flesh, and it slowly gets more and more human, but you have that just that creature that just doesn't look like anything that,
But at least with that, like you knew he was at least trying to get back into like a human sort of form.
Yeah.
This one, I didn't know what it was morphing into. Like I guess until the ending when you see that it is the Sam Neill died, you're like, oh, okay. So I think that kind of surprise was interesting. The spoiler territory is hard because then it's like I don't even know how to approach the ending.
The ending of this film is so. I don't even know how it. I love the ending.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you any explanation whatsoever. But I kind of like the way it looks, just the sounds in general, the eyes, like her eyes are like perfect for this kind of film. I am not gonna lie.
Yeah. We can get into the ending now, just what we think about it and what our interpretations, because like Bart said, it is very much left open to your imagination what's happening. When that final moment where you're hearing more than you see, I don't know, like personally, I got real Lovecraft vibes from the story in general once the creature came in, because you have that whole like thing from just like I used the term before, not of this earth. So my mind went to alien invasion, kind of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers thing, because you're hearing bombs go off, you're hearing alarms. It sounds like the end of the world. So that's what I took from it. I don't know. Did anybody else have any interpretation?
You know what I kind of get more, and it's gonna sound stupid. I know it's gonna sound stupid, but go with me on this one. Little Shop of Horrors, where the alien creature is basically manipulating the one character into making it grow, and then like an invasion happens after that.
I can kind of see it.
Right? It sounds dumb when you first say it, but when you think about it,
there's definitely the elements of that there.
Except for the fact that Little Shop of Horror ends with Seymour and Audrey killing Audrey too, and they end up getting married.
No. I'm gonna go with the Broadway show, not the
That's the superior ending.
Yeah.
So I maybe I could talk this out. So like to try to understand maybe a semblance, because maybe there's not just one interpretation of it. So it was the creature self that I was growing into after she had this miscarriage and whatever this was. Is the creature the miscarriage that is growing, or is that something else completely?
Oh,
that's a good question. I didn't consider that.
Or
that makes it even creepier, to be completely honest.
Whatever happens in that train station, and then afterwards when it's growing into something else, and then then she loves it more than anything, and then but it's like this demon possession that brings about the the Book of Revelations at the end. I don't know, just throwing stuff at the wall here.
I'm trying to remember the timeline in my head. Did we see the creature before the subway scene at all?
But the
subway scene is a flashback.
It's a flashback.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah, okay. All right.
Where she just starts oozing, where it's just like, hey, what's going to cap off this scene? What do we need from the scene? Let's just start oozing from every orifice of the body.
Like this can't get any worse. What's going to happen? Yeah. Oh, it got worse.
No, my major interpretation. I just want to talk with you guys. Do we think that Helen, who is Bob's teacher, is a clone of Anna? That Anna cloned herself to make Helen? Do we think that, just with the fact that they're played by the same actress,
right. It's like it has to be, right? Like it has to be that sort of. But I don't know how that would happen, but she represents the best side of all the other people. Like they're, I don't know, not insane like Sam Neill's one. This teacher is a much better mother to her child than the other one was. So it's like she has to be another doppelganger, but I don't know how that would come about. I have no idea.
Right, she's definitely got to be another doppelganger, but I don't know if she's her if she was created by her, because I don't know I don't get the feeling that it could be from the mother, from like Heinrich's mother,
That's fair.
Oh,
because Heinrich's mother loved her. Loved Anna. Don't forget. And
Helen's eyes are just shining at the end, so I think it
Yeah.
clearly feels like something's going on with her.
And then and the Sam Neill clone also, like his eyes weren't that green, but there's something going on weird with his eyes too. So I think that was the kind of like the visual cue that they were something else. And just her reaction at the end, where like she's whatever's happening, she's in on. So
yeah.
All right.
Wild movie.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
Did anybody else anything spoiler related before
No, I'm
we
good.
move
I'm
on?
good.
I think that's it.
Don't use when you're arguing. Don't use like a meat grinder thing. Like, come
Yeah.
on.
Oh my god! Yeah.
Way too much. They're cutting way too much meat in that apartment.
That was like Chekhov's meat processor.
Yeah, it's like, oh my god,
I'm waiting for a fist to go in that thing.
losing a hand.
That was also weird to me though, because like having used that before, that thing cuts way deeper than it seems like it did on her neck. Like that thing should have been just like everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I do want to just say one more thing. Just it's going to be real fast. That cab driver at the end was way too eager to help. Like, all right, Governor, whatever you say.
This will be fun.
Okay. Yeah. And then one last dark thing. So did Bob kill himself? Did he drown himself at the end?
It looks
I
like.
think that's how we were supposed to interpret that. Yeah.
Dark.
Because they say something about children being on like a deeper like wavelength of connection, and like it kind of implying children like having psychic abilities in that regard.
Like he as soon as that door started knocking, he started panicking, so he knew it was coming.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
He did not want to be a part of it. So yeah, I think that's
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, super dark.
Yeah, real dark. Okay, so we'll come
Glad
out.
we ended on that one. That's the
Yeah, right. That's Milky Way special dark.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll come out of spoilers now. Yeah, if you haven't seen this movie and you skip that section, go back and watch it and come back and see what we say about it, because I think that was a pretty good part of the conversation. So
It gets real dark.
This is probably the only movie of the four where like I would really, really recommend you skip that part if you haven't seen.
Yeah, I think
it's
it's
a little easier to talk about.
Yeah, our next movie, I definitely don't think we're going to need a spoiler for. Section 4. We are going to move on now to the movie I picked, which is in a 14-way tie for number 211 on the 2022 list, and that is the Marx Brothers Duck Soup. Before we get into this, I just want to give an honorable mention. I was very torn between this movie. I wanted to pick something that I felt deserved to be represented and talked about, even though it didn't make the top 100. It was between this and John Cassavetes has two movies in the 100, 250 range. He has Love Streams and A Woman Under the Influence. I gave these guys a choice. I said, hey, let you guys pick, because I can't, and they picked the shorter one. I don't blame them.
And thank God we're talking about not only the short one but the funny one immediately after production.
Yeah, nice
double feature, really, if you really want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't know, guys. Funny one. I'm kidding. We will. Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I just wanted to talk about the Marx Brothers because I think they are. I get a lot of flack. I know a lot of people like them. A lot of people don't. I get a lot of flack for how much I enjoy them. But I think they are so formative to movies and comedy in the 20th century that if you're talking about anything that has to do with that, that they have to be part of the discussion. So that's why I brought them in here. Duck Soup was the movie that was on the list. Probably one of my favorites. I'll talk about why. I probably wouldn't select this one for the list if I had to. But yeah, I just love this movie. I love their comedy style in general. And what I noticed about watching it this time is if you take the Marx Brothers out of this, you could still have a complete movie. And it'd be very much in the style of movies from this era. But we look back at those movies now at 80, 90 years later. We're like, oh, those movies are kind of silly. And that's what the Marx Brothers are doing in the moment. they're taking all the piss out of those self-serious movies that were being made, like those big kind of like grand musical style movies, Hollywood style movies that were being made in this era. They kind of just insert themselves into it like a Bugs Bunny cartoon, and just wreak havoc on everything. So I just love the different comedy styles you get from them, like Groucho's like the wordplay and the one-liners. Harpo is just like this chaotic, neutral, just aggressive force, just like laying waste to everything in his way. And then I really like, I think Chico is just like the ultimate showman. So I think there's something that each one of them really bring to the table that, like,
and then Zeppo's the straight man.
Yeah, Zeppo's the straight man. So like, even if you don't love what one of them is doing at any given moment, like they're going to bring so much. It's just kind of something for everybody. So just, had anybody seen this before? Is this their first time watch? Okay.
First time.
It's one of my all-time favorites.
All right, Barley, why don't you go ahead and start us off and give us your thoughts?
Yeah. So I remember watching like the AFI top 25 funniest films or something like this, and this ranking like super high. And it was the last time I ever went into like a video store. And I like picked up the VHS of it, watched it, and I was like, I gotta have been like 17 or something like that. And I was howling with laughter. Watching it again, I do still love this movie a lot. The jokes don't hit quite as much as they did before, but that's going to happen when you shove like 17 jokes into a single minute. The Looney Tunes stole so much of their sense of humor from these guys. It's absolutely insane. I still use the phonograph needle line to this day. Since I met you, you haven't shut up. Have you been vaccinated with a phonograph needle? Like that kind of like humor is so great. There is a giant musical number that comes towards the end that is like 7 to 9 minutes long. And it is all over the place. The absolute
7 to 9 minutes long of an hour and 10-minute movie. Like
it's like 1/10 of the film. Yeah. And just the fact that all of these people, this giant cast of extras and side characters, are all doing just like the absolute silliest choreography. It's so great to watch. And of course, like we'll talk about it later, but there's one scene from this movie that is just such an icon of comedy now. Like everybody has ripped it off. The Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, like so many.
I think I know because I wrote down in one of my notes was just like, is this particular one like the birth of this sort of gag? So I'm very
yes, it is.
Yeah. Before we get any further, just Jacoby and Payson, I'm going to get you as first time coming in for the first time. Have you seen either of you ever seen any Marx Brothers movies?
No, this is my first. This is my introduction to the Marx Brothers. I'd always heard of them as like putting in the same like group as like Abbott and Costello or like Laurel and Hardy, and like the weird thing I always had as a kid, and I just want to ask if anyone had this confusion as a kid. Did anyone think that Karl Marx was one of the Marx Brothers and had to be told that Karl Marx is completely different and has no relation?
Not me.
Okay. That was just me. Shouldn't have admitted that. But yeah, watching this movie, and I know this is like a weirdly mixed movie in this community. I know, I don't need to give names, but I know like, I'll just give names. Cody said that like he can't see the difference between Duck Soup and Monty Python and the Holy Grail because he thinks they're both terrible.
But
I think they're both amazing, and I think they're completely radically different. Like this movie is much more about like I really gravitated to all the wordplay of it. Well, would you rather have 10 years in 11's worth or 11 year in 12's worth? I just can't like irrelevant honor. Just everything with like all the puns, Groucho and Chico do. I absolutely loved just these like really classic bits that like you would see in movies back then, but just like the whole effect of having the movie like filmed like semi-normally at the beginning, and the second Rufus T. Firefly shows up, the camera is sped up so that way we see him come into like the Congress Hall. He slides on a fire pole, and everything is now sped up, so it's just a little bit.
Just putting up the cigar.
Every time Groucho Marx breaks the fourth wall, like the funny thing about Rufus T. Firefly, he is an awful person. He is an awful, horrible, manipulating person, and he just is somehow manipulating all these people that are slightly dumber than him, and is slightly able to like get the one up on them, and it's just super funny, especially in a modern age. Like, oh, I absolutely love this movie.
Wow, man, then it stinks that I'm going to be the party pooper then, because I actually did. I'm less hot on it than you guys are. A lot of the elements of I can respect the comedy aspects, the comedy stylings that they have. I think that their pitter patter is second to none in terms of what they're able to accomplish and how many jokes they're able to squeeze in a minute. But kind of like how you started this, Kirk, of saying like they are put into like these wacky characters are put into like a real movie with like real characters and seeing them bounce off. I was surprised how much that did not work for me. Like how much I really did not like that there was like these wacky sort of environments of the people playing off of like legitimate people, like, and like, oh yeah, that's a really good point you're saying. Like I'm having a real conversation with you as opposed, and then they'll give like 15 jokes about everything like that. That's why Cody's comparison to like Monty Python is baffling to me, because everybody in that movie is a Monty Python character, and these are just like, you just have the three brothers doing their own thing with all these real people, and I don't know, I couldn't vibe with that as much as I thought I would, so I was surprised at that, but I like the comedy, like the joke, the structure of it was amazing. I just didn't like the movie very much.
I want to say that this is kind of like the start of how the Marx Brothers movies would kind of evolve, because Leo McCarey, the director, was kind of getting like pissed off with the antics and was like, we need to actually put like a real structure to this movie. It can't just be gags and jokes and things like that. So, like, I feel like this is kind of like where a real structure around all of that humor starts, like the real stories behind that stuff. So I think that this is the movie where it starts to get their footing. So I can see where you're coming from with that.
It's so funny you say that, Bart, because I actually did a little bit of research in this movie. People said because the Marx Brothers started out as a stage stage act. People always said, as funny as you think the Marx Brothers were on film, they were 10 times funnier on stage, and they were 10 times funnier in real life. Because apparently in real life, these guys would just joke around. They would not take anything seriously. And I can only imagine, as a director, they just must have been driving Leo McCarey.
We have a movie to shoot. It's like, shoot, what do you mean shoot? Shoot, who's shooting? You shoot? I'm shooting.
Oh, wait, there's a movie? Shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just go ahead.
No,
I was going to say.
Yeah.
What is
I'm
it?
sorry.
You pace it.
Now I'm going to jump in.
I think it was Gummo Marx. Wasn't there a fifth Marx brother? Gummo
There was,
Marx?
yes.
Karl Marx. You already named him. Karl Marx.
Good point. He went off to war, and he literally said, I had more fun fighting in war than I did hanging out with my brothers. I didn't take anything seriously, which is just insane.
That's super funny to think that there are four very silly Marx Brothers all doing that, and then like one normal guy, family sort of things. Like, guys, we got to talk about what we're doing with mom and dad here. They're like, oh, what are we doing here? You know, like.
Well, it's crazy. Just getting into like some of their background. They're, for as crazy as they are, like they were all trained from a very young age. You know, in performance, music, things like that. They're all very talented musicians. So like. There's a discipline to the craziness, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
there's
that's
very much, and that's why I was going. The one I'll segue this now. The one thing I really love this movie. The one thing that always bums me out about it is one of the few Marx Brothers movies where you don't get a piano solo from Chico and a harp solo from Harpo. Almost every movie that they do, there's some point where, hey, there's a piano here. Chico gets on the piano. They go over, and then Harpo does a harp solo. And you say that like, oh, my God, that sounds like that just drags the movie down and would just bring to a complete halt. But I find myself, whenever I watch a movie that has one of this, I am so looking forward to it. Because like I said, Chico especially is such a great showman that as he's playing the piano, he's also performing. And he has like a lot of little tricks he does, like he does finger guns when he's playing, on the piano keys and stuff like that. There's one movie
He'll
where
roll like an apple
he
on
gets
there.
an orange and he's playing with an orange, and you can just tell. And he's always like a lot of the scenes he's surrounded by children, and he's always looking around, like smiling and laughing. And it's never like, "Hey, look at me." It's like he's literally like, "Hey, is everybody having a good time? Everybody enjoy that?" And I just love the energy that always brings to the movies, and I really miss that in this one.
Go ahead.
Maybe this is a controversial take, but like as great as Groucho Marx is as the lead character and like all his like super funny delivery, I think Chico Marx might be my favorite one. Like I just all like him playing like this really like dopey dumb character, I think was super fun. Like I found maybe my favorite line in the whole movie, which is it's where he's in court and the prosecutor's talking to him. And the prosecutor says, "Something must be done. War would mean a prohibitive increase in our taxes." And Chico says, "Hey, I got an uncle living in Texas." "No, I'm talking about taxes. Money. Dollars. Dollars. That's where my uncle lives. Dollars, taxes." And everything there I just think is genius.
That's a great line. That's a great.
And that's why I think what's great about Chico is like he's never like the focus of the bit. He's always like the guy playing off him. He's always kind of like the second banana, but he's so good at that. Whether it's doing the physical stuff with Harpo or the wordplay with Groucho, he's always so good at just like being there for them to feed off of and play off of.
I also want to bring this thing up because it kind of runs across most of the Marx Brothers films. I am so sad that we never get character names as good as we get in Marx Brothers films. Rufus T. Firefly, then like in A Night at the Opera, you get Otis P. Driftwood, and like Ciccolini and Pinky. Like we don't come up with like names creative enough anymore in the modern film industry.
Yeah, I want to talk about a couple of the scenes. My favorite scene in the movie, and I think this is just it's Harpo, especially at his most chaotic, is the scene with the lemonade vendor.
Oh, so that's my favorite. It's so good
because it's so the Marx Brothers have this reputation. People talk about like, oh yeah, they were always just like going after, like they were always like punching up and kind of taking the air out of the tires of people in power with money and stuff like that. But you watch a scene that's like, no, they just treated everybody like that. Like they just terrorized this guy for absolutely no reason. And I love it, like the Harpo's scissors throughout the movie, just such a random thing. Like Harpo's carrying around scissors and just cutting anything, like cutting people's pants, cutting whatever he can. But there's just such a timing and a rhythm to this, where he's doing the thing. Just it's such a simple thing, but where he puts his leg in the guy's hand and makes him hold his leg, and just the timing of that, and then the thing with the hats. And there's so many moments where it's just like such great comedic timing. But then he'll just do something like smack the guy's hat out of his hand and kick it. And
Sleep with his wife.
Yeah, it's so like there's like no skill or talent involved in that at all. But it's just so funny because it comes after all this like really like precise comedy, and it's just someone gonna kick his hat. And it's just so mean. Like it's just they're mean to this guy for no reason, but it's still just so funny.
They know how to make it like craft such a great gag in terms of like that goes through all that runs the gamut of like how many different ways you can laugh at somebody, where it's like it's silly, it's mean, it's smart, it's like it's like all the same sort of construction of what they're doing. We'll probably get like one of those, like all of those gags in one setup of a scene, which is really admirable.
I mean, if we want to talk about gag payoffs, the sidecar bit, like everything, like first gets into the sidecar and the motorcycle goes off and it's not attached, and then that happening again, and it just happens again, and it's comedic again, and then finally Rufus is like, "Oh no, trust me, I'm going to take the motorcycle this time." He gets in the motorcycle, and I think it's Harpo that gets in the sidecar. And now the sidecar drives off, and Rufus is still just like, as if it's going to go off. It's just perfect. It's just perfect.
I love bits like that can like grow. Like I love movies that have like such like bits like in the moment, and then bits that build over time that like may not get the biggest laugh right away, but then like once it evolves into its final stage, it's like the most hilarious thing ever. For a movie to do like both of those things perfectly, it's great.
And then of course, if we're going to talk about favorite bits and scenes from the movie, We got to talk about the mirror scene.
Let me just say one more thing about the lemonade vendor scene. Maybe we were talking about Chico and how he plays into these scenes. My favorite thing about that is after they abuse this guy, it ends with him setting his hat on fire. And Chico goes, that's a nice. And it fades out. Like just perfect cherry on top of that scene.
But yeah, the mirror scene, that is the scene that even I remember like watching when I was like super young, and just like I remember I was crying because it's such, that they put in a shit ton of work to get that just right. And you can feel it, and it kind of adds to the humor of it because of how dumb it is, but how much work they put behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the moment where like they're walking around each other and they each have a different hat behind them. And then suddenly it's the correct hat. It's such a genius little moment.
This is the start. This is the instance, right?
This is the lighting of the
way. It ripped off 1,000 times, but mostly like in animation too. I think animation, because it's very easy to do an animation and drop, but like for two actors to do it and to master the timing of it is incredible. Like it's so cool.
We're going to talk about this movie later in the series, but it's used really well in Garfield's Tale of Two Kitties.
Oh my god!
And Prince are.
All right, guys, this has been a great show.
But what Bart is saying about that scene, just something I found just incredible, is like you can tell how much effort went into it, because as the scene starts going on, they start getting a little bit more sloppy with how they're copying each other, and I think that just adds to the comedic effect. Is like someone's got to call it out eventually, but they keep just going and going. Yeah. It's so good.
The one little bit I love is when Groucho like spins and goes like that.
Yeah.
And Harpo just goes.
Does it?
Yeah. But I also love just that scene is great, but I love the build up to that where they all dress like Groucho.
Yeah.
And they're running around, they're kind of doing like the thing where like one hides under the bed, the other one comes out, they're switching out, like the whole mistaken identity. I love that part of it too. It's weird when you see them do that, how much they look, how they're like identical.
Yeah, it's
and
weird.
Just how like the different like costumes they put on make them look different. And they said that Zeppo on the stage, even though we call him the straight man, they say he was the funniest one because he would go on, like he was basically understudy for all of them. And if any one of them, for whatever reason, wasn't performing or couldn't perform, they said he came on and like without missing a beat, took their place and completely imitated perfectly everything they did.
Wow.
Yeah. I also want to shout out. Was it?
These guys are impressive.
Yeah.
Pretty funny guys. They're pretty funny guys. I also want to shout out Margaret Dumont. She is just so straight the entire film. Mm-hmm. Like she is literally standing opposite of these guys and just stone-faced serious. Mm-hmm. Like it's apparently she did not understand a lot of the jokes. She was just like taking it as seriously as possible. Like it's the whole like Leslie Nielsen in Naked Gun and Airplane kind of thing, where she's just like, I'm playing this as straight as possible. I don't understand the humor of it, but other people do, so I'm just gonna go with it. And she's just so good. Like Groucho is saying some really funny, but also like really nasty stuff.
Yeah.
To her face, and she's just like, "This is the sexiest man alive."
What's the line of "I can see you over my stove, but I can't see the stove"?
Yeah.
I can see you bending over a hot stove, and I can't see the stove.
Yeah. My favorite.
Go ahead.
Will you marry me? Do you leave you any money? Answer the second question first.
Yeah. My favorite one is, and I can dance with you till the cows come home. Or until you come, or something like that. I can't remember.
Dance with the cows, you come home.
Yeah, exactly. Dance with the cows until you come home.
Yeah, I think she did. And I hate to say it, Jacoby, but if you weren't a fan of that, I really don't have anywhere else to direct you because they did what 12, 13 movies,
Something
Yeah.
like that.
and she was in like 8 or 9 of them, and basically played the same type of
But
character.
that's why, like, I loved it when they were like together and they were interacting together. Like, their scenes individually by themselves. I guess it's just when they brought in the outside world to it that I had like with the part the straight face seriousness there. It's like that's the part that like I don't know. I just couldn't click with enough. Like even you mentioned like Naked Gun. Like sure, either like everybody's straight, like everyone is like, or like this hyper like everyone's like uber straight or like in on it, and it's just I don't know why I just didn't vibe with you. Maybe a different Kirk. You said this one is not the one that you would pick for the list itself. What is the one that you would pick?
I would probably go to Night at the Opera.
I would kind of agree.
And that's
actually.
again a big reason being because you get the musical performances in that movie, and,
Sure.
and I'd say it's just as funny. But it does have a lot of these same elements where like you may even like that less because in that film there's like a whole like romance plot between two characters, and that's played completely straight. And then they're kind of the like weirdly playing Cupid for these people, but also kind of like just wrecking their lives. But it's kind of the same pace where they're it's and you have the stuff where they're by themselves, but also when they're interacting with the outside world, it's kind of the same tone.
Gotcha. I gotta check that one out. I gotta see.
Yeah.
I gotta get the
Yeah,
vibe.
I would love to genuinely hear your opinion on that one because while I agree, I also kind of disagree because the world does kind of balance out a little bit more evenly at Night at the Opera. Like it is one of those situations where they are taking the piss out of somebody who's kind of like the big wig, like big shot guy. But that guy is the one that's kind of keeping this romantic couple down.
Yeah.
So it does kind of come a little bit more full circle as to...
Yeah, they're definitely more sympathetic in that movie.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah. But this one is still, it's just like so smart. Can we talk about how this was sponsored by the NRA? Like, that was such a crazy thing to see at the opening of this. Then during the song,
I don't think was it really like the National Rifle Association?
The National Rifle Association.
I did not know that. Fair.
Because like don't forget during the musical sequence, there's that whole moment of we got guns, they got guns, all God's children have guns. Like, yeah, the NRA was helped produce this film.
I've seen that come up on other movies of that era though too, so that must have been a thing.
It was a thing, yeah.
Yeah, where I don't know if they just because it seemed to me like it wasn't like a sponsorship thing. It's like, hey, we're letting you know that like we are part of this. Like it was almost like a public service announcement. So I don't know. I was trying to Google here see if I could find out what was behind it. But yeah, it was an odd thing to see. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else anybody wants to talk about with Duck Soup before we move on?
Really good inclusion of the ducks. If you're wondering why it's called Duck Soup, they do not forget about the ducks. First thing you see, and I can't explain why. I just really love that opening shot.
You do get ducks.
I do really like the villain in this one because he is kind of hateable, but you also kind of have that little twinge of well, these guys are kind of assholes, so like they kind of deserve what's coming to them with this guy.
And I think there is some smart political commentary in here.
Yes.
I mean, this is, basically on the, like, I mean, we're coming up on World War II eventually.
What years are 33?
33, yeah. So stuff's happening in Europe. And I think it just, again, just the fact that it starts out like he takes power. She's like, I will only give you this money if you step down and you put my guy in power. It's like, oh, okay, that's a little cringy.
Okay.
And then, and just that whole third act, there's a lot of commentary in there with them. And to me, I think personally, if the movie has a weak spot, I do think it's that end battle scene. I think it just gets a little off the rails, and they're throwing a little bit too much at the wall. But I do think also like in the musical number, I think there's a lot of smart ideas.
It honestly kind of reminds me of the ending of Blazing Saddles, where like I think Blazing Saddles would be like a top 5 comedy of all time. If you don't have that ending like chase scene, I think I think that just gets a little too over the top with that, and I feel the same way with this.
All right.
You know what's crazy?
What?
there are people who don't like this movie who tell me that I hate fun.
And
How ironic is that?
that's not fair. That's not fair.
All right, okay. So that is Duck Soup. We'll move on to our next movie. This one was picked by Mr. Barr. This one is in a 15-way tie for number 126, or I'm sorry, 196. This was number 93. It made the top 100 in 2012. The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. Barr, take it away.
So I picked this movie because I've heard Martin Scorsese talk about it, because I know that he's a big fan of this film, but I also think that he's just a big fan of Powell and Pressburger in general. And I've never seen a film by the Archers. This is actually my first Powell and Pressburger film. I've never seen A Matter of Life and Death. I've never seen The Red Shoes, Black Narcissus. I've never seen any of those.
We'll be watching.
Yeah, we will be watching 2 of those. So I kind of picked this movie solely off of that because I've known about it for a while, but I've just never had a real good reason because it's like 3 hours long. I'm really glad I did though, because I really enjoyed this film. I wouldn't say I love it. It is a little long in the tooth. There are some scenes that kind of drag a bit. I will say though, that opening scene I really loved that because I kind of thought that Colonel Blimp had to be like one of these guys.
Yeah.
Like I thought that this was like the beginning of the film. And then when you see him and when you meet him, there's no real Colonel Blimp. He's a different name, but when you see him, you're like, oh, now I see where this film is going. And I thought that was just like a really, really great opening. And then it ties itself back in at the end, which I thought was really great. I was not expecting that. Also, just I'm probably mispronouncing his last name. It might be Livesley, but like Roger Livesley is so incredible in this film. Like legit might be one of my favorite performances that I've watched for the first time in a long time. There is just such an honesty to his performance that is just something that like was so enamoring. Like you fall in love with this guy from the moment you see him in his youth. I think that this is just a really well told story. It's not overly complicated, and I liked the simplicity of it. It's just a character study, and I really liked the character, so it did a really good job of making me care.
I just want to
agree.
Go ahead.
So yeah, no, I'm on board with that too. I thought this was a nice look at this man's life of like why he believes the way that he does, and about when a man who believes in one thing over the course of like 40 years is forced to reevaluate that, like, you know, and consider how the world has changed around him. The world's changing, you know, and embracing the future that is unknown to him, and embracing, which is that's why it pairs nicely with our feature after this too, I think. But just I love that type of performance too, of someone he's unaware and like he just cannot comprehend what is happening around him, and I love performances like that. So it's like centering around Candy himself, who in the middle part I was getting, you know, I was a little antsy for everything that was happening, but like where it all ended up and like looking at this as a whole, it's just I think a great examination, even if like the journey to get there might be a little bumpy or a little bit boring. So I thought that was fascinating. Great. I like this movie a lot.
Good, Mason.
Yeah, this was the third Powell and Pressburger movie I had seen. I had seen A Matter of Life and Death, and I had seen The Red Shoes. I had not even heard about this movie until Barr submitted it, and I'm very happy he did because I ended up really, really enjoying it. Yeah, what Barr has said is true. It's not the most complicated story, but I think I found myself really entranced by it because I just loved all the aspects of it. Yeah, Roger Livesey is great. Deborah Kerr, who plays the woman that Candy falls in love with through 3 different periods in time. and Deborah Kerr plays 3 different characters, and every time he's just kind of like, "Hey, you gotta look like this person." It's always just like fun to see that. And yeah, it at times has an optimistic view on life, and at times has like a critical view on life. And seeing this character like try to decide like, well, what do I value? What do I get out of everything? We open on this character in like this really down point in his life, like he's going up to fight in World War II and he's not that respected anymore. And then seeing through time how respected of a colonel he really was, and just where it ends. Like I really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I agree with Bar. Like, I loved the first 15 minutes of it, and just it starts off that score and like that kind of like chase scene feel to it. If I would have loved if this is a knock against the movie itself, but I would have loved like a 90-minute movie of just that at that pace. I think would have been great.
Mm-hmm.
It looks just like all Paul and Pressburger movies. It looks great. You have a Technicolor.
Oh my gosh,
it
gorgeous!
It looks like everyone is painted onto the screen. It's crazy how I don't know how they got to look that way, but it looks so
that shot of like just before like that one duel in the gymnasium, just like the red floor and like where everyone's placed. You're right. It looks like it's a painting.
Yeah,
I love I love The Wizard of Oz. I love a lot of Gene Kelly musicals. I don't think there were filmmakers of the classic era whose movies looked as good as Powell and Pressburger. Like, it just looks gorgeous. For 1943, everything just looks so crisp. And like that is honestly like part of the reason that got me through the very long runtime, because this is a very long movie. When your movie looks this good, I am just like, it feels like every frame is a painting. And just like some of the technical aspects, like the scene where Candy has his duel and then it edits out, and then you pan out, and then you go to like the like wintry snowy sky. It's just like, oh my gosh. Like if you are someone that appreciates technical aspects in movies, you need to dive into the Archer's filmography, especially this movie.
And I wanted to, we were talking about different performances, different characters. My favorite was definitely, they called him Theo, played by Anton Walbrook, I think was the character's name.
Yeah.
He's one of the main characters in Red Shoes, so he's in a lot of these movies. And I just thought he was, as good as Candy was, I think he was much more interesting, because he's kind of running a parallel story that you don't see as much of. It's the same thing where you see this character who starts, basically the story starts at the turn of the century, early 1900s, and goes up through the 30s and 40s. But you see this character's journey, but as a soldier in Germany, and the journey that country takes over the next 40 years, and the journey he takes with it, and how that impacts and affects his life, I thought was a lot more interesting. And to me, those were the moments, especially the last half of the movie, the moments that focused on him were the ones I was most engaged with, the ones that really I connected with the most.
Yeah, that was the moment that hit the hardest when, I guess, is it spoilery movie? It's not really a spoilery movie. Is it? We're talking about the lines of I think when he's the line of just like, my kids, like she died, my kids are Nazis, they didn't attend her funeral, like they didn't show up there. Like, that scene was just like the sad, like I'm like, oh, and he's just lost everything that he has. It's like, so I agree with you that he is like the great like emotional through point throughout this movie.
Because it is kind of parallel. It is kind of parallel to Candy, because he's super highly respected the first time that you see him. And then as the film goes on, he's a prisoner of war. He, like, as you said, his children have become Nazis. He's kind of a refugee in England at that point, and everyone in England's like, I don't know if we can give you citizenship here.
I personally, just in real life, I think that's such a fascinating like time period and place to study is, Germany after World War I. And what happened to that country and how it gave rise to Nazism. I think that's just such a fascinating thing to look at, of everything, like how everything went wrong there. And I think this character is just such a great microcosm of that. Because like Boris said, like he's out there, he's like, I don't believe in this. I don't want to be a part of that. But, no one believes him. He's literally a man without a country. He can't go home. He doesn't want to go home. There's nothing for him there, but no one else will take him.
and the look at Theo as a character, like that would be fascinating if this movie came out in the 50s. This movie came out in 1943, and to see such a like human portrayal of the Germans, who at that time were viewed as nothing, and rightfully so, as the villains of in the war, I think is really, really cool, and like offers a really nuanced approach, especially from the Archers, who, like, if you've ever seen a single one of their films, are some of the most British filmmakers of all time. Like if you watch this movie, you just the feeling of how like English this feels and how proper this feels, and like
it is very proper, yes.
Yeah. In coordinating Sir Arthur Conan Doyle into the plot line, I just think seeing them take like have the.
Have you read the new House of Baskerville?
Yes, yeah.
I have to tell you what happens next.
And just seeing the Germans as not like these like cartoonish great dictator-esque characters, I think was really fascinating.
So I just got a question in terms of tracking Theo's character. I'm forgetting the reason why. So after the war, and he's like a prisoner, and Candy goes to see him, and he expects it all to be proper because, like, hey, we were in a war, now we're out of a war, so we can be back to being friends. And he kind of shuns
friends,
him.
Right?
We're friends, but then he immediately calls him, like the very next time calls him to like meet up with him. What was his reasoning for saying he shunned him in that moment? Do you guys remember?
Oh,
because that moment was very. Because I thought that's a great character. I thought that's where the movie was going. Of just like, hey, he lost his friend. Now his friend hates him because I'm a prisoner of war. War sucks. War did this to me. Like, we can't be friends anymore. What are you talking about? And I thought that's where it was going. And then immediately, like, there's like, oh, sorry about that. Yeah.
Well, because he still has pride for Germany in that moment.
Yeah. It just okay.
Yeah, I think that's more what it was. Plus, it's just like the pride of being a soldier amongst his men, and just being put into that kind of a situation. I think that's more where it came from. I don't remember the exact line of dialogue, but I think that's kind of like along the lines. Only for him to kind of like realize what he was fighting for and like what happened later.
Yeah, so that's why I thought the part where Candy would start to realize kind of like maybe his viewpoint isn't necessarily like he can't go on this way because he's going to lose the people around him. But then it's just like it doesn't do that, which is fine. I think it still leads to a great relationship between Theo and Candy. But I was curious that it made that that back switch so suddenly.
I will say that if I had to point out a weakness in my opinion in the movie, I do think there are a few moments like that where they kind of gloss over some possible like plot points or plot advancements, like that scene there where it's like it's literally the next scene. It's like there's that scene, he shuns them, he doesn't want anything to do with them, and the next scene they're like, hey, we're friends again. They kind of they really don't address that. There's also like a major character death that just kind of like.
Mm-hmm.
Her
death does get glossed over.
You just kind of read about it and then you move on, and like it doesn't really impact the film at all. So I do think like tonally, the movie was a little shaky. I think even towards the beginning, when they're setting up the duel, and like there's like some gravity to it, like this is a serious thing, but at the same time they're planning it. They do that hallway gag where everybody's coming like in and out of the doors, and they have like the comedy score going. So I was just like, what am I supposed? I'm not sure exactly how I'm supposed to be feeling about this moment.
Yeah, I agree, because I forgot about the comedy door gag thing. That scene I kind of just like glazed over for some reason.
Sure.
And is it that the whole duel scene was it? Because then am I correct in saying like he didn't even hurt himself in like the duel? It's because he fell through something like an ice shard in the foot or something. Like
no, I think what they were. I think the point that because they were in the hospital at that point.
Yeah.
And I think the joke there was that they lied. Like they obviously couldn't say we were in a duel. Like they lied because she's like, it's a coincidence. There's also somebody else with a really bad injury here.
Okay, gotcha,
so I think it was they lied to the hospital about the duel. They didn't tell the hospital.
Gotcha.
I do love that they use that as the explanation for why he has that mustache.
Yeah.
Like the most British mustache ever. I kind of just like love that fact. It's like, oh, it's covering up a scar he got from a duel.
It's very Was it Murder on the Orient Express, the new one they did?
Death in the Nile. Death in the
Death of the
Nile.
Nile, yeah, very Death of the
Yes.
Nile. Where,
Oh, yeah.
they give the mustache a backstory.
You cannot tell me. You cannot tell me Kenneth Branagh did not get the idea from this movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I don't think that's an Agatha Christie thing. I think that's a Kenneth Branagh making this movie.
No, that is absolutely a 2022 thing of like, oh man, everything needs to have an origin
Yeah.
story. So why does he have a mustache? I don't know, Kenneth. Didn't ask.
How am I supposed to follow along if I don't know where his mustache? Somebody tell me.
Dude, watching Foster the Lion King, the prequelitis is just out of it. Off topic. I'm sorry.
No, I'm going to skip that one.
No, just good, Jacoby.
I was just saying to build off your point of scenes that gloss over. It's like a moment that again, like this is a movie that's so funny because it's like I think like overall, like the story itself is just one I really love and can appreciate and respect of seeing how this man changes over the course of 40 years. But it's like the moments itself are like troublesome. Like the moment that where his house is bombed, like and that house is destroyed. Sure, I think we have that great moment afterwards where he finally has that reflection of like when the water floods and everything, and then he kind of gets it after all this time. But like the house being destroyed, I just thought I thought that moment was supposed to be a powerful moment from everything we know about the house from all over the course of 40 years. The fact like, oh, it's destroyed now. All right, carry on. And maybe that's the point of Candy's character is that like he's not supposed to really be affected by it until that very end scene. And so he's like, okay, that's what happens, and then he's hit by it. But again, it's just like the glossing over. This movie should have been 4 hours, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it should have been longer.
But
I
agree
with that too because even like they specifically make a joke about one of the trophies, like they pull one of the heads and like they're like joking around with it.
Yeah,
and like those had like an impact. There's like those meant something in the movie. Like there's the times they showed the trophies in the den there. Like that meant something. So like the fact they're just like, haha, look, it's all destroyed now. Yeah, that was another example of something where I'm like, and again, I mean, this was during the war, and that was happening. So maybe it was just a thing like stiff upper lip, the whole British thing. But
that's what he had to be, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do love that they use those trophies to show the passage of time.
Yeah,
I thought that was just like a really cool move.
And it's edited in a really cool way where they would just show the wall and then it just jump cuts to a trophy there. And then it shows another part of the wall, jump cuts to a trophy there. And yeah.
And it just gives you like a place and a time. So like you got to like track where he's been and how much time has passed through it. Really cool way to do that.
Yeah, crazy hunter. I just want to say of the trophies, like, holy shit, this guy
he did a lot of stuff. Before we maybe if we want to talk about the very end, maybe we do spoilers for that. Just because it is kind of like a fun little twist. Did anybody else want to discuss anything else before we move on to that?
No.
Would you guys fall in love with Candy? This man who's like 20, like for that love story. The second time he's just like, why you love me? I'm 20 years older. I'm a soldier. I don't really care about you. I'm gonna run off to war all the time. And then she's like, yes, that's exactly what I want. Since it's important. Like, oh. Wow, this guy got pretty lucky there,
All right, Jacoby triggered it. Do we just want to get into our side topic on age gap relationship, guys? Like
oh my god.
So let's talk about the ending. So what happens there? Again, we'll do spoilers now. The beginning. It's kind of it's a flat. It starts out in the future towards the end of Candy's career, and it flashes back, and then we come back, and there's a whole little story, a subplot of this, and it turns out like you don't really like. At least maybe I'm stupid. I didn't pick up on it, but I didn't realize until the end that this was what the movie's supposed to be about. Is him kind of adapting to how things have changed, like specifically in terms of like the military and war, but like in general as well. But he goes, the movie starts out where they're running war games basically to train, and they're going to start at midnight, and the other side says, hey, you know what, we're going to go at 6 o'clock because the enemy's not going to schedule it. So that starts the whole thing, and you go through it. At the end, you kind of get like the opposite, like a different point of view of what was happening there, and it kind of like makes him look better in retrospect, because he does kind of look like stupid, like he looks kind of foolish at the beginning. What did you guys think about the ending there?
I honestly love the way it ties in, because like you get different angles from like as opposed to the beginning, like the whole thing with like Deborah Kerr,
Mhm.
and then like at the beginning you kind of see that it's Deborah Kerr, but you don't really because you're not really paying attention to her. She's not the main focus. Um, and then like at the end when you're like seeing Deborah Kerr, you're getting all these like different angles of like the direction of where in the room during that like you're focusing on. I really loved that aspect of it because, as I said, it shows you a whole different perspective of what's going on in that moment, and you kind of see the whole idealism that Candy has kind of disintegrating in that moment.
I really love the ending because I think that it's finally Candy just accepting that the world and specifically war in general has passed by him and he's just finally okay with that. Like he's not going to be super bitter about it. He's just going to be like, look, I am no longer the standard that you should be chasing. I can now look ahead of you guys and see what you guys are doing and realizing that I am no longer I do not serve the value that I once did, and that's not necessarily a problem. Time has just passed me by.
Oh, I'm getting all teary-eyed. Oh,
Yeah.
Overall, the ending. One, I guess I should mention also, I didn't realize till this conversation that Deborah Kerr was playing all three of those women. Did not realize that. That makes a lot of sense. I
That's
thought they
because
all
she's
looked,
such a good actress.
thought they all looked similar. I thought that was it, you know. But also, like the ending itself, I liked to speak, I guess, in broad terms, like comparing like the beginning and the end. I loved approaching this movie at first because in that opening scene, I actually was probably I was on the soldier side in terms of like this is a smart move, right? Like this is like doing it beforehand. Like you are the champions here, and then it gives you 3 hours of just like why this would be so affecting and hurt like this guy. Maybe I agree with him because I do agree. He's just time has passed him by and he needed to adapt. I at least understand his sadness about it. And I think that's any great thing a movie can do is like just maybe if you don't like relate to it 100%, but you can understand exactly why he is feeling that way because it explained it so well, then I think that makes it a really affecting and powerful ending. So that's, I really.
No, I say the same thing. The fact that they set up in those opening scenes was a character named Spud. Was that they called him?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they set him up as basically the protagonist of the beginning of the movie. And then you come in, okay, now like because we've gotten so connected to this other character, he's kind of the villain. But you have that base where you're like, okay, no, think about it. Like Jacoby said, beginning of the movie, we knew he was doing the right thing, and and then Candy comes to that realization as well. I think it all kind of ties together really nice.
I also just love his delivery of the line, "But war starts at midnight."
Yeah.
It's kind of along the lines of "Evil Dies Tonight" for me.
Yeah. And I think good, Jacoby.
I was just saying I did have to look up afterwards in terms of like Colonel Blimp, like why was it called Colonel Blimp? And it's because it's based off a caricature of a guy, like, and that's like the cartoon character of it. So this is I guess a good comic book adaptation.
I guess it was real controversial too, because I guess like Colonel Blimp was like a caricature of like British soldiery, and like calling it that, and like I guess like Churchill really hated this movie. And like did what he could to suppress it because like I think they said he took it personal, like he thought it was about him specifically. So there was like a lot of kind of controversy in England, just culturally stuff we obviously overlook that they took really personally.
Which is so funny because Churchill was someone who he was he started out in power when like they weren't at war. And then he left power, and they brought him back in when war started. And if you look up on the history, everyone says he was a significantly better prime minister. Prime minister was what his title was, right?
Yes.
Like he was a significantly better prime minister when England was at war because that was just how his sensibility was as a leader. And I find that fascinating that he would take this as an insult.
Yeah. And I think too, the fact it took me a while to realize that it was the same actor playing Candy the whole way through. I think that's a great like makeup job. That's
crazy.
Really because when they initially did the flashback, I'm like, oh, they recast him. But as they started aging him, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's the same guy the whole way through. So I thought that was pretty impressive as well.
Yeah, that makeup looks phenomenal at the end.
That makeup's incredible.
Theo's is like a little less to be desired. He just gave him some like, gray hair.
You're like, oh, he just kind of whited his hair up a little bit.
Yeah. But I think Candy was also like specifically meant to look a little cartoonish at the end.
Yeah.
Like I think like his aging was exaggerated purposely.
My question also about does the home guard, does it do anything? Like, or is it really like a lot of just appearances on the home front of like organization and stuff? They don't. I didn't understand what the home guard did.
I didn't like my interpretation from the movie. I don't know about like from a historical perspective. I assumed it was kind of like a thing where it was not taken seriously, and like his goal was like, okay, this is going to be a serious thing, because the way they made it sound like they were. If England, because I mean, obviously everybody was out on the front. If England got invaded, they were the defense.
Yeah, that's kind of my interpretation.
And I got the idea that like before Candy got involved, it wasn't something that was taken very seriously, and he was trying to elevate it to something that could actually be useful.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
that's fair.
All right. Any last thoughts before we move on?
I think I'm good.
Not on this one.
Okay. All right. So we will move on to our last movie of the night. This one was chosen by Payson. This is a 16-way tie for 169 on the 2022 list.
Nice.
It was number 81 in the top 100 in 2012. The Magnificent Ambersons. Payson, tell us about the Magnificent Ambersons.
Yeah, this is just a movie that so I'd never seen this movie, and the reason why I picked this was as someone that considers myself a pretty big film fan. It's one that, knowing the history behind it, I felt like it was important that I should see it. In case anyone doesn't know, this is the second film directed by Orson Welles, which, like, the idea of Orson Welles making Citizen Kane, and having it being lauded as Citizen Kane was, as one of the great movies of all time, and then having to be like, okay, how do I follow up on this? And just watching this movie, seeing how different it is from Citizen Kane, but also seeing similar themes to like what's being explored, I think was really fascinating. I really wanted to see how all the backstage drama with this affected the final product, because in case anyone in the audience doesn't know, this is a movie that famously Orson Welles lost in the editing room. The studio took over, and Orson Welles was never a fan of the final cut of this movie. And he said after that, after making this, he said, I would never make a movie where I didn't get final cut, because he just didn't enjoy it. And I just find that fascinating, because watching this film, if this wasn't made by the guy who made Citizen Kane, this would be considered like a top echelon in someone's filmography. Like, I really, really enjoyed this. It's a lot quieter than Citizen Kane. It's a lot more like ethereal, but I really loved just how human it felt.
This is a play. Like, this is a play.
I get that.
It's not actually a play. It's based off of a book, a Pulitzer Prize winning novel, but it kind of comes across as like a Mercury Theater production. And I, being the theater nerd actor that I am, like that draws me to it. 'Cause there is like a theatrical over the topness to some of these performances, but in a way that's still subdued enough that it carries and it comes across as like realistic. Joseph Cotten in particular, slowly becoming like one of my favorite character actors, like of all time. Like whenever he pops up in a film, it's just fantastic. I love the angles and the cinematography in this. Some of these shots are fantastic, especially whenever they like shoot on that stairwell. It's just like a gorgeous set piece. I don't love what's the kid's name? Eddie?
George,
thank you. I don't necessarily love George. I do kind of get where he's coming from, but he also is just a little too unlikable for me. So there are like especially the fact that he is just like. I both love and hate the fact that he goes to that one woman's house to basically accuse her of just gossip,
Yeah.
and he thinks that it's like treason. Which I get character wise, but it kind of made me hate him just like that much more. I do love the woman that he goes to accuse because she's like, motherfucker, get out of my house. Like,
Now you're
yeah,
crazy. Like,
I talked a little bit of shit. That's all I did. So get the fuck out. But yeah, no. I am forgetting her name. Anne Baxter. Anne Baxter. She's giving a performance in this film that I absolutely loved, because during the scene where he's like, "I'm going away. Aren't you sad?" She's like, "I hope you have a great time. Aren't things great?" And the moment he's gone, it's just like everything collapses inside of her. Like, I think that she's giving such a great performance in this. This is a really great movie. I don't necessarily love it, but I really enjoy it a lot. It is a great film.
I agree. I agree with both of what you guys said. One, I didn't know about the story until after about how Orson Welles lost Final Cut, and that gave it all like a tint of just kind of sadness to it. And knowing that the changes that he made, the part that Orson Welles does not like about it, it's like, I agree. Like, I wish they didn't do that. What they did to that. But I thought that this was great, like a mighty work built off your cinematography point. That shot that's burned into my brain is like when George is on the stairs. Joseph Cotton comes in. They go into the parlor. It pans up to the ants on the stairs, and then they kind of shift perspectives as they go down. Like, that is just brilliant. It's like about like how they're able to do that. That's great. And then also, fuck George. That dude's the worst. That's what's great about the movie, I think, because I had like this unexpectations. Like when George comes home from it, I don't know what, because I obviously I don't have as a wealth of silent film knowledge. The only thing I could really compare it to is like It's a Wonderful Life. It's like, oh, Jimmy Stewart coming home from this, like he's has that sort of vibe. So I thought we were kind of go that route of redemption. It's like, no, this guy is kind of the villain of this movie, but that's what I think is so brilliant about it, is how it kind of shifts to like, oh, this is like Joseph Cotton's story. This is like this guy's story and how he's dealing with that. Like, where the side character of it is really the protagonist that we're following, and we're following the antagonist throughout all of it, which is just a really interesting way for this movie to be made. But I thought it was great. I love this one a lot.
Yeah, no, this is a really solid movie. Pace, you compare it to Citizen Kane. I think where I saw the similarities were in the visuals. I think there's as much like filmmaking here going on as there is in Citizen Kane. It kind of reminded me of Barry Lyndon, where you have so many scenes that just look like a painting, and you have that where just like the most mundane situations, just like the way he uses lighting and shadows. Like, I love the way that like all like any like bad conversation or anything like negative going on, it's like dimly lit and shadow, and everything else is like, and I just love like all those, like I feel like he's used a lot of the same tricks as in Orson, or in Citizen Kane, but not as showy, like not as flashy. It's got a little more subdued, but it's all still there. Like, they have that one tracking shot where they at the party, where they're just walking through and they go up the steps, and the scene that Jacoby mentioned hit me as well, where you have like the two levels of steps and they're looking down, talking to each other. I thought that was amazing. I could see where Age of Innocence comes from now. If you see Age of Innocence, like very much just like, here's how life was back then. Let me narrate and walk you through every step of it and the way they lived and what they did. I very much, Scorsese, definitely homage this movie in Age of Innocence. Performance thought to me was Agnes Moorehead. I thought she was just so great as like the eternal third wheel. Just like, she's in love.
Oh, what a way to put that.
And the fact that she has to like lose him twice, like she's like, she loses him the first time when they're young, and then like he comes back like, oh, here's my opportunity, and then that's gone. And how she just kind of like, she's like a Mrs. Havisham kind of character, where she's just kind of haunting that house, and it's just like, just has no like real purpose in life, and like the way it ends for her is just so sad and depressing. Because like you said, George kind of has it coming, but like she just never got a break. Like she just like was like so put upon her entire life. So I just really love her character.
The way that you described her character as like the eternal third wheel, that's such a crushing feeling.
Very accurate.
Just like, because like at first you're kind of like, okay, she's kind of in on this, like, I'm gonna ruin this relationship kind of thing because I'm gonna tell George about the gossip that's going around town and break that up. And then the moment she realizes that what she's done, everything just like completely shifts for her. The guilt kicks in at like at 11.
Yeah, just bouncing off what Kirk said, I don't think any director knows how to use shadows quite like Orson Welles.
No.
Like, these are the only two movies I've seen of Orson Welles. I really should watch, like Touch of Evil and The Trial. I want to delve more into his filmography, but just the way how he uses shadows to make things just look so haunting, I think is just so effective. Another piece of filmmaking I noticed while watching this was Orson Welles always said his favorite director and his number one inspiration was multiplex certified hack John Ford. He's been deemed by Multiplex as an overrated director. Not on this show, of course.
I was about to say the views and opinions of yeah.
But there was a scene where George and Fanny are talking in their house, and you just hear the rain outside, and it's super atmospheric, and you can really see the inspirations of the motifs of John Ford in Orson Welles' filmmaking in that scene. Kirk mentioned he saw a lot of Age of Innocence in this movie. During that scene in specific, it reminded me of the scene in Killers of the Flower Moon when Ernest and Molly are talking for the first time, just one-on-one, and you just hear the rain on the outside, and just adds a level of atmosphere there. I really, really love the filmmaking here.
How about that scene where at the train station where he's talking to the uncle and he walks away and it just like he just fades, like it's an ethereal like light, and he just fades into it. It's just what is happening there is crazy.
That monologue in particular is one that I'm so ready to just like put in my back pocket throughout the show myself. Because I'm listening to this going, this is really good writing right here.
Did anyone see who edited this movie?
Robert Wise.
Oh, it's Robert Wise?
Yeah. I didn't realize that, and just knowing how legendary, like how like notorious the editing is in this movie, and just seeing like I feel like I had vaguely heard that Robert Wise started out as an editor, and just seeing that name, I was like, oh, that's pretty fun.
Well, because he also edited Citizen Kane.
I didn't know that. Oh my gosh.
I believe so, at least.
I think so.
That's cool.
I'll double check that.
I just saw Robert Wise's name in the credits. So I'm just like, there's a few Robert Wises, you know.
And one day he'd go on to direct Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
More like the slow motion picture, am I right, boys?
I do want to talk about that because this is something I wanted to bring up with. You know, this is like a kind of like an epic feeling story. Like you follow this family through multiple generations, and it's only 90 minutes long.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask the question, like, is this a movie that should have been longer? Could we have gotten more out of it? And that, and Payson, you see, I'm ignorant to this. What do you know? What Welles, like, what he wanted, like, what his original vision was, and how different was it from the way it turned out?
I should have looked it up. I know he's been specific about it, but watching what you've said, like, I love this movie for what we got. And I think the fact that we've heard that this is kind of a jumbled film, I think is just really fascinating that it is as good as it is. But I do think if it would have just maybe been like 15 minutes longer, it could have been like, it would have been in the same conversation in the way we talk about Citizen Kane, or even how we talk about Touch of Evil, which I feel like is a more famous film in Orson Welles' filmography.
So do you know what he wanted differently and what?
No, I don't. That's what I'm asking. I'm not sure.
The ending. He didn't like the ending. They kind of reshot the ending for him. Like they that was the mandate. Are we because it's the ending.
Yeah.
The
okay. Yeah, we'll go to spoilers now, just so we can talk about everything.
Yeah,
So
the happy ending that they get is not where he wanted to end it. Even though I think I forgot if the happy ending is more like no, I don't even think the happy ending is in the book. I don't think so. But the studio wanted the happier sort of peaceful sort of ending, and he did not. And that's just because he just wants that's how it is. It sucks, and not have.
Guess what? He got hit by a car and dies.
Yeah, and not like walk in, that's why we don't see him and like at the end say, "Yep, in that back room, he recanted. He became a good person. We all forgive him. He said such wonderful things." Like, and everyone was happily ever after for being hit by a car working for chemicals or something. So, and I think that's why this movie ended when he says like Georgie would have gotten nobody was around. But Georgie finally got his comeuppance. I personally think I would have loved the movie, to be honest, if it ended there. Like I
kind of agree.
Just dying.
Yeah. And I was just like, God, great, feel bad ending, love it.
Yeah.
Fuck
that guy.
But so I don't know what else was cut in between it. I didn't even realize this was only an hour 37 minutes. Now that you said that, like it felt like there was so much in the movie itself. But I guess it does fly pretty.
Because I think it's because you cover so much, and I think it just, whatever was cut out and was missing, I think it was pieced together well. Yeah. Where it's like, okay, we get everything. We have a lot of time jumps, but we get everything we need from every period. And there's a lot going on. There's a lot of meat on the bone in every scene that we get. You're given a lot of information, a lot of character, character work, but it does move very quickly, even though you're covering so much information, so much time.
Yeah, even movies that that have this. I love topics like this. I love movies that are like where characters are up against like the precipice, if I'm using that correctly, of like change, of like the great innovations. Like the automobile is here, right? Yeah. Like we know from the audience perspective that it's everything, that it revolutionizes everything. And now we have this family who's just like automobiles, like this. Yeah, where's the old classic horse and buggy? Like we know how it goes, and I love when people are stuck in their old ways, clashing up against the future. Like those are great stories, but those are usually much longer stories too, rather than just like an hour 30 something minutes.
But you're right, it feels like it's so much longer because of how much is condensed into this script. Sometimes when you have a script that's just like as rich and plentiful as it is, you don't realize how much you're actually getting time wise.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's cool that Orson Welles went from Citizen Kane, which is largely about this one man, is a heavy character study about this one person, how he changes with America, seeing it through the 20s, and then going to The Magnificent Ambersons, which is a much more of an ensemble piece and dealing with a lot more layers. And I think that's really fascinating that Orson Welles was never someone that wanted to, he always wanted to challenge himself as a filmmaker. He always was someone that like viewed himself as being an excellent filmmaker and was like, fuck you, I know the correct way for how I want to tell my stories. But he's always someone that like wanted to challenge himself. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah. I think too, just real quick, wanted to hit on what Jacoby was talking about with like the whole automobile thing. I love that theme of like technology.
Yeah.
And I think like, there's things we talk about, like, how we look at AI. And how the conversations we have with that is the conversations they're having about the automobile. And it seems so quaint to us, like Jacoby was saying now, to talk about the automobile.
We need new laws.
Yeah, I heard it. No. Like, crap, cut it out. Cut it.
But there's, but just the fact that like something like that we take for granted, that at the very start of it and how it's going to change their world, how their world will look completely different in a certain amount of time, I think is really interesting. A very timeless story.
A very timeless story that will go on through generations.
Just bouncing off what Kirk said, I'm someone that views myself as a fairly anti-AI person, but I'm also someone that does look at it through a realistic mind of like, I want to keep it as far away from like the creative process as possible. But if you think I'm living in this like utopian world of like, oh, it's never gonna like seep into any part of my life, I'm not an idiot. Like I know probably in like 10, 20 years, we're gonna look back on like this time period and be like, man, it probably wasn't as like doomsaying as we thought it would be, or at least I hope that's how we're going to look past.
Well, I
And
mean, look at the world right now, and automobiles have been the cause of all our problems.
Well, but I just think that's fascinating. It's like if you look at like the car, like it's the exact. There's certain people who are terrified of it and are just like. There's certain people like, well, we got to embrace it. There's certain people like, oh, it's not going to be that big deal. Why are you worried about? Like it's like the same approach we take to that they took to the automobiles. I just think that's fascinating.
No, 100%.
And I love speaking just of these characters like brushing up against automobiles. I love this movie because specifically, like, yeah, George has like a specific gripe against it, but it's also so rooted in character because he doesn't want this guy banging his mom. How much he hates it. Like, it's so great. Like his motivations behind why he's being such a petulant child against future, but also to keep things the way that they are. That's great.
Yeah,
it's also just like that great dynamic of at the beginning. He's like, "What's this poor guy doing with my mother?" And then towards the end, it's like, "Why is this guy getting rich and we're getting poor?"
Yeah. Would you guys take a chemical job if you needed money right away? Like,
Hell no.
Let's go. Like, hey, they just need some guys to like just go grab this dynamite crate, and move it over there, please.
Jacoby, I'm not sure what grocery prices are like over in Las Vegas. They're a little expensive in Phoenix. I might take chances.
You might take the like a sorcerer sort of route, just like, oh, maybe like I can
maybe not that extreme. Maybe not that.
I still have to watch that movie.
So
it's so good. So if nobody has anything else to cover, I do want to talk real quickly about the end credits.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
All movies should do this.
Yeah,
I just think every movie should do this now.
I just love Orson Welles and like how, and I think that's like a blend of like his stage background and like bringing that into life where he introduces like hey, here's Joseph Cotton, and then like they like edited by Robert Wise. They showed the editing machine. I just love that, and I think it's just such like I don't know how to describe it. Just such like a beautiful touch, like of like you see his love of filmmaking in that, where he wants to bring you in to every part of the process.
It's sort of like the final bows whenever like there's a theater show.
Mm-hmm.
He probably should have added like and fuck RKO,
But this has been an RKO Productions.
Yeah, RKO.
It honestly reminded me a lot of the credits to like certain Robert Altman movies. Like I think Robert Altman is like the king of credits, with like MASH and Brewster McCloud and Nashville. And watching this movie, I'm like, maybe this is where Altman got it from.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
All right. Did anybody else have anything they want to talk about Magnificent Ambersons? Any other points to make?
I will say, just to correct myself, so the ending that they reshot for this without Wells's permission and knowledge was the original book ending.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It cut 40 minutes from the movie itself when they took it from him.
Wow, that's a lot.
So
okay, so I didn't. As we wrap things up here, I didn't ask for individual scores or anything like that. What I'll do for this episode, because we're dealing with stuff that didn't make the top 100, we'll go around. And of these four movies, if you could put one of these on the top 100 or back on the top 100, which one would you pick? Payson, I'll start with you.
I am going to go. I think I'm going to go with Possession. Like, the more I watch it, the more I think it's like, it's becoming one of my favorite horror movies. And I really love just really cool body horror movies like that. So Possession would be my pick.
Cool. Jacoby, how about you?
I think I might go The Magnificent Ambersons. I just think that's it's a mighty work told concisely in things that covers so much, and it's such an achievement in filmmaking and storytelling and everything that it has to say is brilliant. Given all this trouble that it went through too in order to get there. So if I had to pick one, I'd pick that one.
Bora, what do you think?
As much as Duck Soup is like one of my favorite films of all time, if the Sight and Sound list is going to be able to get away with this, I'm going to be able to get away with this. Number 100 is a tie between Life and Death of Colonel Blimp and The Magnificent Ambersons.
Hey, that's fair. And yeah, I think these were all really good movies. I'd only seen Possession was the only one I watched for the first time, but watching this through this lens and kind of like analyze, I really enjoyed all four of these. But obviously, I'm going Duck Soup because I like fun. So, but
fun?
Believe it or not, but that will bring us to the end of our first episode I really enjoyed having this conversation with you guys. I think it was a great time. Thank you all. Jacoby, thank you for joining us. Bar and Payson, thank you for starting this journey out with me. We will be back next episode. We will be officially episode number 1, cracking the top 100. We are going to have Amaru Moses joining us, and the movies we'll be discussing are Tropical Malady, Black Girl, Get Out, Once Upon a Time in the West, and The General. So I hope you join us for that, and we will see you all next time. Thanks for watching.
Later.